All right, let's see. Oh, and I found me right away. That's unheard of. Okay, perfect. All right, so I did make some notes so I can kind of keep myself on track. And hello, Tracy. I see you're here. Nice to see you. Okay, so I want to start this video talking about hi about energy and how changing your internal energy um, about something outside of you, or I guess about something, changes the way that um, it shows up outside of you. Um, and this is, I mean, the ideas behind this are because what's in our subconscious mind expresses into the world around us. And so if you have something coming up for you at an emotional level, or where you have a lot of negative stories around something, or you can feel like a heaviness in your body, then that's a really good way for you to understand that you have something. There's something here to be resolved. And so there are theories that essentially these things are coming up because our psyche will always find ways to resolve, I guess, the unresolved experiences that we've had. And so, and I mean, this is really the foundation of a lot of manifesting teaching. Neville Goddard talks about like getting into a calm space. And I'll talk about a little bit about that later. Transurfing also talks about really moving into that space. They call it letting go. Wayne Dyer talked about this, and although he was really teaching Neville, he also did teach the Tao, which says similar things. When we stop trying, we get to be. And when we be, we have. So it's like be, have, or be, do, have. We don't have before we are. So some of the reasons that I want to talk about this are because I've had a few conversations recently that made me realize that not only can this be challenging for some people, I mean, that part I knew, but it appears that it can be a little bit unclear. So while I talk about the energy, and anyone that's practicing this can confirm its effectiveness, I also want to provide some examples to make this a bit more clear. That this is not just like a magic woo-woo thing, that this actually shows up in grounded three-dimensional reality, that when the energy is different, the interactions between two points of consciousness change. So the first thing I want to note is that I don't mean to imply that you're never going to have challenges again, because to be human is to experience contrast. And so when you learn to stop resisting that contrast and understand what it's showing you, you're going to move through your challenges a lot more easily, and you're actually going to often find that you have a lot fewer challenges, right? Because as I mentioned before, a lot of them are essentially an opportunity to resolve something within you that's been unresolved. And it's often, the trick is that it's not always like face value. And so I've talked about this before, this topic, but I wanted to expand on it also because there's no real need to make creating reality complex. It's literally about your perceptions and your experiences. And so, so some examples, and I'll post some links in the comments so you can see, but I'm actually going to also attempt a screen share. Anybody's guess as to whether or not I'm going to be able to make that happen? I feel like I have before. But if you Google like unlikely animal friends, you're really going to find them all over the internet about, so like a deer and a dog, a cat and a fox. And this is not because of anything other than the energy is different. And when the energy is different in one, the energy is different in another. A really great example of this that I'm going to show you are, I'm not sure if anyone has ever heard of them, Amur and Timur. So I'm probably just brutalizing the pronunciations of those names. But basically, Amur and Timur, so one of them is a tiger and one of them was a goat who was intended to be the food of the tiger. So the tiger had eaten every other goat before, but the tiger did not eat this goat. And it was because this goat didn't show any fear. So let me see. I'm just going to pull up Wikipedia and let's try a screen share here. Share screen. Oh, nope. Let's try this again. Oh no, I guess we're going to share the screen. All right. Share. Not quite. Thanks for bearing with me here. Okay, let's try this again. Share screen. There we go. So essentially you can, like, there's a Wikipedia page. There's a lot of examples of this set of animals that demonstrates that when the energy in one is different, the interactions change, because there's nothing different about this goat than there was about every other goat that he ate, except that this goat went in and had no fear. In fact, wanted to play. And then they became friends until, in true goat fashion, the goat got a little too frisky and ticked the cat off. But the cat still never killed the goat. Yeah, you've read this. I mean, when I first heard it, I'd already been, I was already really familiar with the way that if you shift your energy, the people around you shift. And so shifting energy really requires you to, all right, let's stop sharing. It really requires you to let go of the old story, right? So you can't shift your energy while also still hanging on to the resentment. And so this is sort of the caveat of this, that when we let go of the resentments, when we let go of the fear, then we don't have the reason for the resentments and the fear. But you can't, you can't, this is why ignoring circumstances is not the way. It's literally to shift that perspective, because energy is always balanced. So there's always a corresponding energy to whichever one you're vibrating at. And that's why neutral energy resolves circumstances, because it's already in balance. It has no meaning. And in fact, that is the feeling of trust. And I'm going to talk about that before the end of the live. But emotions are energy in motion. And so I'm not talking about your mood. And I mean, yes, granted, your mood is contagious. So you can definitely light a fire amongst the people around you if you are in a terrible mood, because they will pick up on that. There's actually a scientific term for the way that emotions are catching, and I don't happen to know it off the top of my head, but the next time I talk of this, I'll bring that term. And so because I'm not talking about your mood, I want you, when you think about a thing that you're trying to create, I want you to start noticing the feelings and the stories that come up around any of the around this topic. And it doesn't have to be heavy. Like, for the longest time, I could not create parking spaces, which is the thing that everybody can create with no problem. And it's because in my mind, I had this lingering doubt about, like, ooh, I can't create this parking space, right? So I had this, like, these feelings and these stories, and I was really identifying with them. So it is a matter of noticing the stories. And one of the major stories that I see people get caught in is, why isn't it happening? And it's not happening. What's wrong? So, and if you really take a minute and, like, consider what the implication of that is, you'll understand how you're actually creating a barrier for yourself. Even seeking to make it happen. This is why trying, all of these things, these have a feeling to them. And so when you can, like, shift when you can move into, like I said, I've talked about this a lot, that neutral space about something. And that includes all the perceptions about why isn't this working? Because that is a really subtle thing that is showing you something. So, and it doesn't matter whether it's finances, whether it's your job, whether it's a specific person, whether you're trying to become a millionaire, it's always the energy and the stories that are going to come up. And depending on whether you want to identify with them or you want to create your thing, you're going to want one more than the other. And you have to, it helps to become familiar with which one of these you're more aligned to. If you are more determined to stay in fear and the what ifs, well, what if, but this, but, then that is what you will continue to get. So it's really important that every time a but comes up, you recognize that that's a story and it negates something that you're creating, because but in itself just is a negation. And so if you have negative energy around something, not only does it siphon the amount of positive energy that you have to invest in creating that reality, right? So imagine you have like finite amount of energy throughout the day, and half of that energy is going into fear. Well, how much energy do you have to create something new? And if you're in this place, you're either going to stay in this place because you don't have enough energy to move you out of it, or you're sending more energy into fear, and then you are diverting yourself. And because we have these psychological, like protection mechanisms, you could call them. Some people refer to the ego as this, but we can fool ourselves. Oh, well, I'm doing the work. Well, I'm doing the whatever. But if you're also allowing fear, if you're also allowing yourself to really continue to get hooked into like reality, three-dimensional reality, and I don't mean to say that I don't, because I 100% do, but then at some point I catch it and I change it. So I do that shifting work. And that's why I put out a video on YouTube about how when you're manifesting, shifting is really the only work that you actually need to do. And so if you, if you struggle to shift, then that's something else. And I'm going to talk a bit about that. But so if you have, that negative energy, then it's really siphoning away your ability to create that thing that you want. And an example of this, I've told this story before about, so this was the moment for me that I realized that if I didn't feel a feeling, that the corresponding external reality just didn't happen. And so I remember when I first started doing this work, I was kind of hiding it away. Like I was helping people move through some of their circumstances and see the different perspectives and challenge their beliefs, but I was hiding it. And so I was feeling that need to hide it. And so that alone, feeling the need to hide it, gave me a reason to need to hide it. And then the next thing you know, my husband came across an email and was like, "What's this about?" Even though I felt like the guilt and the fear and all the emotions that really corresponded with his reaction, which I had created by feeling the need to avoid that reaction. But it was in that it was a gift, because I realized, wait a minute, I'm not doing anything that I need to feel fear or shame about. And so I just chose not to feel those feelings. And it did come with that perspective shift. I had to make that perspective shift to change the way that I feel. And so the two are a pair. But when I did, I no longer had a reason to have to feel that, if that makes sense. And so I use that tool for everything. If the fear comes up, then I'm noticing, why do I feel this? Right? I'm really looking at myself. I'm not looking at what causes the fear. So I'm looking at myself, and I'm wanting to understand what's actually coming up for me. And then if I can, if it's just a simple perspective shift, then I'm going to make that shift, because I know that energy only carries as far as we carry it. So if you are able to make that shift, to move into neutral and shift your perspective about this, and I want to make that very clear, because some people might misinterpret moving into neutral as moving into apathy. So they are different. They're very different. But moving into that neutral space, so that's where we don't have those perceptions about that anymore. We've shifted that perspective. Then external reality then begins to work itself out. And this is the mirror principle of reality, that an energy always has a corresponding energy. And this is because energy is always looking to seek balance. And so, and I mean, sometimes in seeking balance, it's using sort of the pendulum. Oops. Sorry. Yeah, so this is also an area where I see people can kind of get confused. Apathy is your nemesis. Yeah, apathy, I definitely have experienced that for sure. And the key to any emotion apathy is there because it's become a protection mechanism for you to no longer feel some of the negative emotions that you don't want to feel. And that whole feel it to heal it is the case with apathy too. So really just allowing yourself to be with that apathy. And then seeing it more as a gift than like it's showing you something. It's allowing you to move something. The thing about apathy is that most people, they don't want to move it because underneath the apathy is all the things that they've been not wanting to feel. And I say this knowing full well, yeah, it's like ripping off a Band-Aid. It hurts at first, but if you let it go, it goes quickly. And then if you don't, it's literally like leaving that Band-Aid on, allowing whatever is underneath to fester and like just kind of poking at it, getting poked with things. And so that's not, that is often where a lot of our greatest blocks are, is that we kind of get sucked into this like toxic positivity. Just don't feel it. And I'm going to do a video on this. In fact, I have 2 that I'm going to record after I'm done this, because otherwise there is a chance procrastination and getting distracted are my nemesis. So that I want to talk about to kind of show why we don't want to just always be so focused on feeling good, because then we often, all the things that are holding us back are actually still there. So anyway, back to the mirror principle of reality. So the mirror principle of reality, a lot of people kind of get confused with this. So for example, maybe their partner shows up and is like angry and maybe cruel or whatever, however they're showing up. And that person looks at their partner and says, oh, well, that's not me. So they're not mirroring me. Well, that's not quite how the mirror works. Right? So I have an entire playlist on my YouTube channel about the 7 ASEAN mirrors of relationship. So those are the ways that that person is mirroring you. So they are mirroring your relationship with your parents. They're mirroring what you are in the moment. They're mirroring what you judge, because whatever we judge, we get to keep, which is why I said last week, it's really important if you want to change something, particularly with another person, you must work on releasing your judgment of whatever it is that they do. And so that's the point of this video, is to talk about getting to that neutral space. So, because that's the same, releasing judgment, neutral space. There's a lot of ways to describe what this is, but this is your power place. That, or the heart center. But it's a lot easier to get to neutral space if you're coming from some of the lower energies than sometimes it can be for people to get into the heart center. And so another way that the mirror principle works, aside from the 7 mirrors, I've talked about this before. When we see someone doing something, we should ask, often we're projecting. So we want to ask, where am I doing this in my own life? Or where am I able to do this, but I just really haven't given myself permission? Or where do I want to do this, but I haven't really taken those steps to allow that to happen? So this could be, maybe maybe you want to recreate that relationship, but you haven't really, that's a terrible example. So I don't know, maybe you want to apply for the job that someone got. And so rather than being triggered by the fact that they got it, maybe you need to look at what you need to do in order to get there. That's actually more how that works. So other ways that the mirror works is it's really important to remember that it's corresponding. So when you look in a mirror, you're not looking just at yourself. You're looking at the corresponding version of yourself. So when I raise my right hand, the mirror is not raising its right hand. So it's like that polar opposite. And so a good way to think about this in a more tangible way is, and I've talked about this before, anger, the matching energy to anger is anger. The corresponding energy to anger are like fear, defensiveness, shame, avoidance, anything that tends to be matched. If someone is angry, do you feel fear? Are you defensive? Do you feel shame? Are you feeling guilt? Are you avoiding their anger? So all of these things are not neutral. Even avoiding, that's not neutral. So the tattoo I have, that's what this means, is to be able to move through your circumstance and find that space of grounded centeredness, because that is going to allow things to change around you. And I mean, that is the tool. That is when I say the work is shifting. That is what shifting is. So and so a lot of what this looks like in terms of what you're doing to get there. So something happens outside of you. So my tattoo says, walk with calm into the storm. And so it was kind of to remind myself, because I'm not going to lie, I'm not always good at this initially. A lot of times I can be, but not always. Sometimes I absolutely get sucked into my reality, but I know it doesn't matter where I am. The minute I can decide to move into that grounded centeredness and start testing my perceptions about the situation or understand what's coming up for me, I have the opportunity to move it, because it is a matter like your energetic, like what you're manifesting is essentially an expression of whatever your perceptions are, however you identify yourself, your emotions, and your identity is demonstrated to you through your emotions, your beliefs, your actions, all of that. So, and I'm gonna do a little exercise at the end of this to kind of show you what I mean. So the best way to end an energy is simply to learn to manage your own internal condition in the face of that. So where you will never stop other people from being angry, you will never stop them from judging you. But what you do is you're unbothered by it. You learn to be unbothered by it. And what actually happens is, if you have a particularly angry person in your life, by being unbothered by it, you actually reduce the amount of anger that they will show up with. But I mean, they're going to come home, maybe they're going to come home from work upset, or maybe something's going to happen and they're not able to really manage what's going on, and so they show up as anger. Does that need to take you on a trajectory of arguing and resentment, or can you recognize what's going on? So sometimes I suggest people, rather than moving into forgiveness, they move into understanding, because understanding shows that, okay, I understand I do this too, and I don't agree with it, but I don't need to judge you for it. I don't need to take my life on a different trajectory. And so sometimes this also means recognizing that someone is consistently shows up as negative in your life, and then you have to ask yourself, do you really want to put in the work to neutralize your response? Because I'm also going to admit that I'm very selective about where I put myself in and the amount of exposure I have to certain people in my life, because while I recognize that they are showing up to show me something, there is, as a human being, there's only so much that I can take. And I 100% give myself that space, recognizing that I value me first. I have lots of compassion for other people, but it's that put on your own gas mask. So if someone is consistently negative or draining or there's conflict, then I often say that when you're in a situation like a split partnership, the best place to learn to do this work is in a separation, is when they're not in the same house as you, because I've done it with both. And I'm going to say it's so much easier when you're not faced with it constantly, even though I'm sure the people who don't have the person with them feel different. I assure you it's not the case, because now they're going to trigger you, because what love looks like is you come into there's you, and then this other person comes into your field and it feels amazing. And then what happens is all of your garbage comes up and all of their garbage comes up. And what's actually happening is it's coming up so that you can understand what you need to clear in order to stay feeling that love that you felt in the beginning. There's nothing external to you that's happening. Your psyche is like, oh, I have this thing and these look similar, so yay. Even though you might be less excited. And so, yeah, you don't really change reality by trying to change the things outside of yourself, by requiring someone to be nicer. You learn what your reaction to their negative response to you, their anger, you learn what that's showing you. You learn what identity is, what painful parts of your identity is coming up. And then being willing to recognize that these energies in yourself, this then allows you to do whatever shadow work or subconscious work you need to do to free yourself from this, because that's essentially how you move into how you shift those perceptions. Because if you're struggling to shift those perceptions, then chances are you have something in your unconscious. You have that shadow, that thing that you're rejecting about yourself, or that thing maybe that makes you feel not enough. And so it's never really the case, because you're never not enough. Nothing that's ever happened to you has ever changed who you are, but you did change your perception of yourself. And so that's where the work, that's where, if you struggle to shift, that's where you're going to find a lot of your freedom. And so, yeah, this kind of brings me into trust, because that neutral space, that moving through those emotions, that shifting, that is shifting into trust. I mean, it doesn't matter whether it doesn't matter what you're manifesting. Moving into that trust is the important place to be, because then, see, now my nose, always, there's something about alive. It's the only time my nose gets itchy. I don't know what psychological thing that is for me, but so we know we need to trust it. It's all through biblical texts. It's all through the ancient wisdom. It's all through new manifesting teachings, is that we just need to move into faith and trust. And so trust is that neutral space. It's a feeling of calm. One of Neville's main points of teaching, and I don't teach a lot of Neville because I think he's, as I said before, Neville does Neville best. And I don't really, but I do like to use him as a point of reference, because Neville, one of Neville's teachings sort of drove all of this home really fast for me. And so one of his main points of teaching is that feeling is the secret. But what's not really highlighted much, especially when you're getting it from like secondhand, is that the feeling that he's talking about is a sense of calm. And he references this in a lot of his lectures. I was going to bring one, but in true fashion, I could not find it. I have a lot of Neville lectures. So like 300 or something. So it was a lot to go through. But I do have a few where I've highlighted that he talks about that feeling of calm. It's the most normal feeling of all. And so when you have the feeling of having something, we think, oh, well, what does it feel like to feel like a millionaire? It feels regular. It feels, you don't get the gas bill and go, oh, that's what it feels like. So as you notice, you have a circumstance, You have a negative emotion. And so instead of having that negative emotion, if you had the thing, you would feel calm. If I had my partner back, I would feel calm. So we have this idea of like, we need to feel this love. And I mean, I've definitely talked about this because, yeah, the best feeling is calm. You're right. And I definitely have done that where I, get into my heart space and I create from there. There's a lot of teachings from there. That is very powerful. It is like freaking magic. But I'm also going to tell you that so is calm. And when you are moving from a place of where you might have fear or you might have doubt, what's easier? Getting in your heart space and feeling like vibrating that love, like letting your heart center expand, or just getting calm? I'm going to say it's always calm. I always hit calm first. And so calm is that feeling of having it, because when you have the love, you're calm, you feel that safety. When you have the money, you feel that calm, you have that safety. You can go on that trip and your mind isn't racing how to make that money to go. You just get on and you book it, and that's calm. And so that he actually references this in a number of his lectures, and I will find one just for the point of it, because I do see a lot of people say, like, I don't know what this feels like, or I have a hard time accessing that feeling. You don't have to. You just have to access calm. So here's another thing that I think is really important, and I'm going to go over. But I feel like these are some of the most important points if you can really understand these, and then not just understand them, it's very important that you put them into practice. Start small. Start with something that it's easy to shift your perspective of, so that you get a feeling of what it's like. I'm not saying, hey, you and your estranged partner, just totally erase all the feelings and perceptions you have, because I recognize that there's probably some more to that. And so this next bit will kind of help you with that. I'm going to quote, I pulled a quote out of, I think Feeling is the Secret. Yes, page 9 from Feeling is the Secret. Neville says, feeling is the one and only medium through which ideas are conveyed into the subconscious. So if you are struggling to reprogram your subconscious mind, that's why the feeling, that's what changes your subconscious, because as I've said a lot of times, your subconscious, like 80 to 90% of it is actually your body's response. Joe Dispenza talks about it when the body becomes the mind. But if we really look back to some of our first emotional experiences, for a lot of us, it predated language. So, and it bypasses the reasoning mind. You will have that emotional response. It's just going directly, it's bypassing your conscious functioning. So to tell someone to just tell a new story is really, in my opinion, not as effective, because if they've got something in there they need to change within their subconscious, telling another story isn't going to help. And so he says, therefore, the man who does not control his feeling may easily impress the subconscious with undesirable states. Therefore, what he's saying, by control of feeling is not meant restraint or suppression of your feeling. That was important. I didn't want to leave that out. But rather the disciplining of self to imagine and entertain only such feeling as contributes to your happiness. So what this is the more negative feelings that you continue to feel about any subject, the more you continue to impress and affirm to your subconscious that that thing is negative, that you can't have it. And if reality springs from our identity and from our subconscious, then maybe you can see where I'm going with this. That if you must change your feeling about something. And for the people that are going to say, no, I don't have to, I'm going to say to you, that's because you're already unconsciously competent. And I mean, I create lots of things very easily, and it's because I'm unconsciously competent there. And I also have had areas where I've struggled more, and I've had to really use these tools. And that is why I really am impressing the importance of understanding that emotional component, and just practicing moving into that space of calm, practicing looking at what your perceptions are, because your beliefs and perceptions are connected to those emotions. And so it's important to stop reacting to circumstances. And I say this from the place of someone who totally some days reacts to circumstances. And then for some things that I've struggled to create, I've gone right into that, like months of fear, of like move out of fear for a little while and then go back right into it. And the thing about it is when I see the shifts, when I see the change, it's when I stop trying to control the things outside of me, and when I really just make my internal condition. And when I see people make leaps and bounds in this work, it's when they do the same. When they stop trying to control what's happening outside of themselves and they start noticing and challenging the perceptions and feelings that they're experiencing about that one thing. And so a tool to use that so that you have something tangible to take from this is when that feeling comes up, you must want your thing you're creating more than you want to feel the negative perception and the fear and the doubt, and just move into presence. Because in presence, you have nothing more but you, and you pull all of your energy into this present moment. And then you from there can make that shift into something more positive. And that might take you some practice. Some people, it takes a bit of practice to do. But like, give yourself that leeway. Recognize that this may be a learning process. This may be a process of reprogramming your subconscious. But every time you shift your response or your reaction to something, you're actually changing your subconscious mind. So that's important to understand, because there's a lot of stuff out there about how to change your unconscious or your subconscious, whatever. And it's not all wrong. For some people it works, but for some people it's not enough, because actually what is happening is they have responses that are literally programmed into their body. And so if you're ignoring that piece and you're just going into thinking things, then you are taking the longest route possible, and you're not changing your subconscious mind. You need to not just get into the feeling, although that's really important because it gives you a benchmark of where to aim for. That's why clarity is important, but it gives you that benchmark. So if my partner is horrendous, I want to maybe consider reducing contact with them as much as possible. And then I want to begin to focus on the version of them that I know is exceptional. And then when they show up as horrendous, I want to be able to move into that space of feeling where I know that they're exceptional, even though they're showing up as horrendous right now, because that's what's going to shift them. And I mean, I know this from personal practice. I know this from teaching people this, that if you can move into a neutral space and tell a new story, and this again is where you see them in that different light, even if they're showing up as like terrible, then you're not only shifting reality, but you are literally reprogramming your subconscious, because it's that moving of your emotions. You're telling your brain that either I'm no longer this person, or I no longer have these beliefs, just by moving your body. So yeah. So again, going back to this, some of the confusion I understand is often that we all talk about like the mind, and all is mind, but remember that your body contains clusters of neurons in your mini minds. So those are also the mind. And Neville references imagination as God. And so a lot of people can get confused and think all they need to do is just think some thoughts. And again, for some people, that's totally going to work, especially if they are unconsciously competent. Therefore, they have if I just think, I didn't have to put in a lot of efforts to not get parking or speeding tickets. But I made that decision, and I notice whenever I kind of waver out of like that calm state, because now, I'm in the not believing, and that identity actually does get tickets. But the identity that doesn't get tickets, she has no need to feel anything but calm. And I can guarantee you, every time I drive by a police officer and I'm speeding, either I look down and I'm no longer speeding, or they don't notice me. I haven't had a speeding ticket in years. And I haven't had a parking ticket. And I even tested that for 2 weeks. I didn't favor parking at work, just as sort of I'm going to test this theory. And yeah, nothing. 2 weeks. And I parked right by the door. So anyway, So when you make an assumption, you're calm, right? And so, sorry, back to imagination. But so imagination, we think that we just need to use the thinking part, but that's not true. Remember that your mind, so your imagination, it incites emotions. So when Neville says imagination is God, he's not just talking about your brain. He's talking about your entire state, right? And so it's important. Your imagination creates feeling. So you want to be able to feel into it. And if you can't, then that's going to tell you that you have something unresolved to work through. And it's probably got nothing to do with the other person. Or the career that you're creating, or whatever it is. It's probably residual from some of your initial experiences. But like I said, when you make an assumption, you're calm. Your mind isn't racing. You're not caught up in doubt or fear or sadness or any of those negative emotions, right? If I'm assuming that say I order a pizza and I'm assuming it's coming, I'm pretty calm about the whole thing, because if I start moving into like anger, chances are that I'm now doubting that the pizza is actually coming. So it's important to necessarily recognize when the emotions come up for you. What are these implying, right? And that is why calm, just cultivating that calm, your internal condition, cultivating that, and then creating from there is where you're going to be the most effective. And this is trust. This is faith. And so you can manufacture it by beginning to work on your internal condition and just reach for that place of calm. And so if it's not obvious, this is the reason I talk so much about your emotions. It's also why if you want to create and you're not creating, forget, like some people will tell me things, and this breaks my heart a little. Well, I tell myself X, Y, Z, and that's not doing anything, because you're still potentially running this subconscious program, and your subconscious and your conscious mind. Your conscious mind, as I mentioned, can definitely imprint your subconscious. This is the intention of like making a decision about yourself. There is a whole feeling. You will know if you've made a decision, because it's literally like door shut. No other emotions are coming in. This is who you are. That's it. I'm going to the grocery store. There's no fear that, I'm not going to get there. I'm just going. And so instead of saying, I'm telling myself this, or I'm, whatever, learn to manage your energy. And, if affirmations help you do that, great. If they don't, recognize all the techniques, all the tools, all the visualizations, all of it is to help you get into an energy. The visualizations actually, if you're doing something you've never done before, your mind can only take what the experiences it's ever had. And so it's going to say, no, you can't do this. And so what actually happens when you visualize, because your mind doesn't always know the difference between reality and what's in your mind. I mean, stress itself, the definition is like a real or perceived threat. Perceived being the operative word. And so your mind doesn't know, and you actually begin to create memories of something you've never experienced. And so in that, your mind is no longer triggering your body to say, ooh, this is unsafe. This is, this is the unknown. So visualization can be really excellent when you're creating something that you've never created before, and you need to build that belief. You need to remove that fear. And you want to be diligent with this. You're not going to just do it 1 or 2 times or just willy-nilly. You need to you want to commit to these things. If you actually want this thing, commit to these things and recognize it's not the visualization that creates the results. It's what the visualization does to you at a physiological and mental level, and I guess energetic as well. And so really managing your energy. And I don't just mean, like I've talked before about, like raising your energy, because that is great. That's going to help you really start to let go of some of the heavier things, but it's not necessarily going to help you let go of some of the limitations. And so when I'm talking about managing your energy, I'm talking about it in a more layered way. So you're going to have like your energy, right? So if I go for a run, I know I'm going to be in a lot better state than I just lay in a dark room for 3 days. So that's one level. But then another level is to notice, how am I responding to the outside world? And if something is triggering some emotions in me, or I'm having racing thoughts, or I constantly move into fear or worry, or I doubt, or I'm triggered by external circumstances, then then that's the thing that you want to manage. So you want to check your perceptions. What is this showing me about myself? What is this showing me that I believe? I've had some crazy things come up that like seem completely out of context from what the actual argument is about. And it's because I actually, instead of looking, and don't get me wrong, I've definitely looked into the external world and said, that person's a jerk or whatever. But when I'm really ready, once I've, blown that desire to get hooked into the negative feeling, or really get hooked into what's happening, because it feels really real. But our thoughts and perceptions are not real. Our emotions are not real. They are something that we manufacture. And so they are our perception, and they're affected by our life experiences. But when I'm willing to actually look at myself instead of the outside world, now I'm doing that second layer. And then when I'm willing to move the emotion, and I mean, that often takes, we'll have a little internal conversation with myself about, like, what is this really about? How can I find understanding for that other person? Or who is this showing me that I am? That one is when I'm finding a recurring pattern is taking me out. That one is the most powerful, in my opinion, at least. Yeah, basically, because if I'm feeling angry, I'm not feeling angry because someone did something. I'm feeling angry because it's bringing up a painful part of my identity that I am most likely completely unconscious of. And so here's kind of like an example of how your different feelings will show you your identity. They're going to show you how you're identifying. So if you want to play along, just close your eyes for a minute. And imagine yourself standing outside your place of employment. So for some of you lately, that might just be standing outside your house. But you're standing outside your place of unemployment, and you've been let go from your job. So first, I want you to imagine that you feel calm. You're completely unbothered by this. So why? Why do you feel calm? Why do you feel unbothered? What does that feeling demonstrate that you feel about your future despite now being unemployed? Or about your ability to get a new job, maybe a better job, or to make a life pivot? Maybe you want to make a career change from here, because essentially you can choose how you see looking at this job, and that's going to be very tied into how you identify yourself. And so now I want you to imagine that instead of feeling calm, you're standing in front of your place of employment. They've just let you go, and you are filled with fear or bitterness. So why? Why do you feel that way? What does that demonstrate that you feel about your ability to get a new job, or to make a life pivot, or about whether you feel powerless in this situation? It's the same situation, but in both instances, you have that opportunity to take it and make it into a moment of possibilities or a moment of learning, or you can take it and you can feel like it's a moment of detriment to you. And so, yeah, these two different states will really, and how you feel in each of them is going to show you not what is happening, not what the situation is, but who you are. Because if you feel maybe you're afraid, then maybe you feel that you're going to struggle to get another job, or that, you can have a whole myriad of negative stories that are coming up, but they're going to show you who you are. It has nothing to do with the job. Your self-concept literally has nothing to do with your external world unless you continue to internalize your experiences. The way that you identify now, you may have internalized things that happened to you and made meanings about yourself, defined yourself by them, or determined that they are who you are. But your response to something actually shows you who you are. It's not the thing itself. It's how you're responding to it is going to show you something about you. And it's going to be very powerful if you let it be. Okay, so to summarize, if you're feeling stuck with your creation, instead of trying to change the thing outside of you, instead of trying to do all the work to make it different, make the focus of your own make the focus your own energy and your perceptions about that person, place, thing, opportunity, or whatever. Notice your triggered emotions, like notice the stories. And then if you can, shift. It helps, again, to have that clarity about what you're shifting to. What does that feeling already feel like? Because it's really can be challenging to shift into a feeling if you haven't practiced it first, which is, again, where visualizations can come in to play. So I understand if we are in a relationship and there's a lot of turmoil, it can be really hard to access that feeling of love or of adoration or admiration or respect for the other person. And so that's where you want to start, is you want to start being able to practice into that. And if you can't, then you want to ask yourself, when the feelings come up about the situation or what they do, like, what is this showing me that I believe about me? Who is this showing me that I am? And so, again, if you can't make that, because for me, I think I gave an analogy in a video about, like, creating reality is essentially like being at a group dinner. And you have choices of how to respond. But if you can just move into that space of, like, actually, this is what I have, right? So you move into the calm, you tell a new story, because telling a new story, if you're not in that calm, it's basically useless. I mean, I don't want to say completely useless, because you might get there, but the chances are you're going to get hot and cold, or you're going to get there and you're going to lose it. Because you haven't really dealt with the thing, that aspect of your identity. And I have another video that I want to do with diagrams about identity that I think will kind of help understand maybe why making some decisions about who you are that are empowering is really important. It's really one of the first steps. And so, yeah, you just want to notice those triggered emotions and those stories. And then if you can't do that shifting, right? If you can't easily shift the perspective, then that's where you want to do the shadow work. That's where you want to do the subconscious work, because you have an emotion that's anchoring you, that's making it hard to make that shift. But you really, if you want to if you want to see significant shifts and changes, then you want to go at that internal. You want to do it at the identity level, and that's not about like anything other than really your internal condition, because your identity is made up of, like, your emotions, your beliefs, your actions, all of it. And so you can skip a lot of it if you just go right in at the identity. And so one person, just like I demonstrated with that being fired analogy, those are two separate identities, the same situation. And so how you respond to things, as you shift your emotional response to things, and with it all your, like, your beliefs, you are essentially moving into that new identity. Okay, and so, like I said, make your internal condition your priority, because as Neville would say, there's no one to change but self. So yeah, that's pretty much yeah, an hour. Yeah, I don't know if you have any questions about any of this, but if not, I am going to go make a couple of videos before I get sucked into my reality and don't. And this is that moment where I just sit patiently and wait for the lag. Okay, seems like everybody's okay. So have a really wonderful Thursday. And yeah, if you have some questions just following this, just put them in the comments and I'll respond. So have a great Thursday. I am going to go sweat because it's nice and hot.